Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our energy that we're currently navigating, as well as the eclipse we're moving into. We're really in that portal right now. We're feeling the intensity since the lunar eclipse a week and a half ago, and we now have our solar eclipse coming up on the 2nd of October. So I want to dive right into the chart so we can talk about what we're experiencing right now. Today is the 25th of September and we have Mars and the Moon joined um, in Ardra. And actually, this is very early in the morning here that they're exactly joined, Mars and the Moon. But Ardra is the storm. It's ruled by Rudra, the howler, the fiercest form of Shiva. And this is a place in the sky where we often see some really hectic energy occur. A lot of the more cataclysmic events we've experienced in our history have happened with planets in Ardra and across the way in Mula. On this axis. We don't have any planets there right now, thankfully, but we do have a storm heading towards the southeast of the United States, and also the Caribbean and Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, are experiencing this hurricane. And so we can see how that stormy energy just right away started to accumulate. The other end of this, not so stormy, but more of a under the earth, under the surface um, fire that we are experiencing is Mercury, the Sun, and Ketu joined. So as I'm filming this, the moon has already actually moved on from being in Ardra, and the moon is already in Purnavasu um, by by late morning here in Hawaii, and maybe afternoon for some of you. But Mercury is moving closer to the sun as our days go. And the two are not going to be in exact conjunction until Monday, the 30th. But K2 is passing both of these. And we'll see first the sun moves into conjunction with K2 on the 28th. So a little bit later in the day, like around the afternoon, here in Hawaii, we have the sun and K2 joining. K2 moves backwards, right? The nodes are always moving backwards and the rest of the planets are moving forward. So as the sun gains degrees, K2 is pretty much staying the same right now because it moves rather slow, but the sun is going to pass through K2's void. Now, our eclipse itself is when the sun, the moon, and the earth are all lined up so that we can't see the sun's full light, right? Because the moon is going to pass in front of the earth's reflection from the sun. But the node is this point in space that's been calculated as where these eclipses occur. So where Rahu is, where we experienced our lunar eclipse a week and a half ago, where K2 is, this axis is where we're experiencing these lineups of the sun and the moon and the earth in this whole year and a half period since November 28th of last year of 2023. So the sun itself is moving in direct alignment with K2 on Saturday prior to our eclipse because it's an annular eclipse. It's not a total solar eclipse. So it's one of those ring of fire eclipses where it's not a complete coverage of the sun, but you see this glowing red orb around it. And so right now in this week, we're experiencing that piercing energy directly in our power, in our connection to source. We might have a lot, and you can see here, on the 28th, we have the moon also in the sun's sign of Leo. So our moon is also being very affected by the sun's presence and position in conjunction with K2, and it's in the star of the ancestors. Magha is ruled by K2 and has this energy of bringing us into the past, all of our lineage, everything that's come before. We're in the middle of Pitru Paksha as well, this 2 weeks between our full moon and our new moon, where we are honoring our ancestors. And so there's a lot of this old stuff coming up, old stories coming up, old things we need to heal and clear that might be passing through us and passing through our lineages. And K2 is a reminder of things not only from our familial past, but from our own personal past, and particularly pertaining to our power, our capacity to hold power, our capacity to hold power in the things that we're creating and manifesting, as it's in this star of Hasta. But Mercury and the Sun both just earlier in this week passed through Uttara Falguni, where we make agreements. So in the beginning of this week, we're making all these agreements and like, okay, sure, I can do this. Okay, I can do that. And then by the end of the week, as we move even closer into this eclipse portal and the sun is getting obliterated here by Ketu, we have, or eviscerated is maybe even a better word that I like to use with Ketu. It has this very cutting and piercing quality where it really cuts to the quick, if that's a phrase my mom used to say when I was younger, like it cuts right to the point of something. So wherever you feel that you haven't been holding your power, it's going to cut right there. Now, it's in Mercury's sign, and Mercury is also being eclipsed by the sun. The sun and Mercury are so close together that we have what's called combustion, where the energy of Mercury, the communication, the ability to organize, all of this sort of amicability and flexibility that Mercury brings to the table is being overshadowed by the sun. And we might feel like our words aren't being heard. Our communication isn't getting through. Somehow we're having to like repeat ourselves and nobody's listening. And maybe we make a joke about it, or maybe we don't because it's in Virgo, it's not in Gemini. So we're not, as laughy about things. We're more serious and precise about things being communicated a certain way. And then we're not heard by a boss or a, person in power, a parent or teacher, if you're, in that kind of position, or somebody who holds you've put them in a position of power, even if they don't actually necessarily have that feeling for you, or whatever your whatever the sun rules for you, whatever house the sun rules for you, that can also be a reflection. For Taurus people, the sun is the mother, it rules the fourth house. So it can have to do with your mother. For Sagittarius people, it's the ninth house. It could have to do with a father or with a teacher, which is more along the lines of an authority figure. So that energy of oppression is present already. And then we have Ketu having us feel like the very heart of why we're not powerful is coming to the surface. And it's in this very meticulous sign of Virgo, where we're oriented towards the details, and the details of what's not right have been the thing we've been harping on since November of last year. So all of this is coming up, a lot of past stuff, a lot of familial stuff, and a lot of personal pain that we've been navigating with regards to our place in this world and our capacity to hold our power and our capacity to communicate. And so then you see on Sunday, we have Ketu now with Mercury. The sun has passed through and now Ketu's joined Mercury exactly. So exactly what's wrong with our communication. That's why we don't have the power. This is the new story we're holding as the moon is in Purva Falguni a little bit later in Leo's sign. And we're trying to enjoy and, relic in the fruits and the desire nature and our capacity to just have delight. And in the meantime, we've just had our power pierced and now we have this experience of recognizing exactly where we're not in our perfect communication. And all of this is having a reflection from both Mars and Jupiter, but they're in a little bit later degrees. So Mars is at 20 degrees, Jupiter is way later. It's at 26:59. So it's really not going to hit the Mercury and Sun until a little bit later. But there is still that energy. Mars is still sending that fiery gaze from Mercury's other sign of Gemini saying, you're right, this is wrong, and really getting into the idea of justifying our opinions and arguing and wanting to be right. And this is not helpful in our communications either. There can be a lot of anger that we're reckoning with right now. Ketu brings up anger, Mars brings up anger, and feeling like we're not heard brings up anger. What we have in Virgo often is a lot of passive aggressive anger that we're not necessarily showering all over the place, but it's what we're feeling. So it might come out in other ways. It might come out in ways that are not quite so volatile or violent, but beneath the surface, because Ketu's always beneath the surface. And since it's in an earth sign, there might be some actual things beneath the surface as well. This can bring up things like earthquakes. And, last week when Mars was directly on Ketu, giving that gaze, we did have the eruption here in Hawaii. It was like exactly that day that it happened. We had the lava started to flow again, and not in its crater, a little bit outside of it. So these kind of things do bring out geological things as well. The storms that are happening right now and lava and earthquakes and all kinds of things start to come about It's not just our bodies that are affected by the bodies in space. It's all of it. And then, of course, we're going to move into our eclipse. But on 30th, we have our Sun Mercury conjunction. We have that exact conjunction where we really don't feel heard after we've already seen the heart of what's not right in those places. Then we have this come together. And, the reason why I sort of bring up the more negative quality of what can come up is because that's often what we experience first and foremost. That's what alerts us to the fact that something's going on, is that we feel the negative energy of it. But we, of course, always have that capacity to shift into the more positive recognition of what's coming up for us. It's an opportunity to heal. It's an opportunity to heal our relationship with our communication, recognizing that no matter how precise we use our words, no matter how clean and clear we make our agreements and how written down they are, it doesn't change the fact that everything's living and breathing and operating in this universe. And it's all dependent on each other. And just like we learned in our lunar eclipse, and as we're going to learn again when we have our next full moon in this energy of Rahu, not quite an eclipse, but an almost eclipse or a partial eclipse, we can't control everything. As much details as we pay attention to, we can't control it all. It doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention to the details. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try to make our words say exactly what we mean and take care of as much as we can. It just means that we also have to have room for surrender. We also have to have room for the fact that everybody else is living and breathing, and honoring agreements is really only as good as the people that we're making those agreements with. And even if you're making an agreement with the most solid individual who's always true to their word, things happen in their life, things happen in their universe, and they might have to change and shift those agreements. And we need to learn more fluidity. The rigidity of our ancestors is showing itself now because we keep trying to make more rules to make everything more right. And it's not bringing us more in alignment with nature. And so the more that we can learn how to balance that quality of taking care of what we need to take care of, but also leaving room for the reality of the present moment, because the reality is just the infliction of schedules and times that we have to be somewhere and all of these things that we have to account for in our life is all manufactured. It's a man-made installment into the natural world. It doesn't naturally exist. We would naturally be working with our biorhythms and our clocks, and we would know when the right time to do things was. And there would be days when we wouldn't be as much running forward. It wouldn't be because it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. It would be because that day doesn't have that energy. We would be so in tune with the cosmic influences as well as the calendrical ones, the solstices and the equinoxes. We would be in tune with the harmony of where we live locationally and how that looks for us. Is it wet right now? Is this storm season? Is storm season a good time to do things when you live in a hurricane type place? Is this a time of year when the leaves are starting to fall off the trees, or is that not relevant for you? Everywhere we live, it's very different. And so this is a really important thing to recognize that's coming up for us, is how much we're reliant on all these outside influences and how much we're trying to force the world to be a way that it is not. And we're forcing ourselves into that as well. And that's why we feel boxed in and out of sync with nature and out of sync with ourselves. And so these are big themes that are coming up for us in this Virgo Pisces axis. And as we move forward, we'll of course have our actual eclipse on the 2nd with the sun and Mercury and the moon. And I'll talk about that, in a new video on the eclipse itself. But I just wanted to touch in because the energies are really here and present with us right now. We're not just navigating, it's not like the eclipse just happens on that day. We're in this portal and we're really moving towards this place of reckoning. And in many ways, it's happening now, before the eclipse. And not just because we haven't gotten there yet in the lead up energy. People have different theories on the amount of time it takes, before you feel the eclipse. And I think it's different for each of us. Depends on your relationship to the sun and the moon. The eclipses are always relative to full and new moons. So if you're a Leo rising or you're a Cancer rising, for example, or if you're on the other side of that, a Capricorn or Aquarius rising, where those rule your 1st and 7th houses, you might have a very different relationship with eclipses than other people do. But for each of us, these different energies are in different houses, and the sun and the moon rule different things, and Mars rules something different, and Mercury rules something different for you. And that's why I do breakdowns for my Patreon group for each of the 12 signs, because it really matters who you are and how you're experiencing this. Just like in your natal chart, where the planets are means a lot. It's not just the sign, it's the house it's in. In fact, the house in many ways trumps the sign it's in, because it shows what place in your life that's showing up and how it's showing up for you. So I invite you to look into this, my Patreon group. It's at patreon.com, Radha Home Astrology. You can also go to my website, radhahomeastrology.com. I have a fun quiz you can take to find out how far you are on your life path. I offer life path readings if you want help in determining how connected you are to what your actual natural flow is and rhythm is, and whether or not you're living in that power. And of course, you can always tune in to find out what the forecasts are for the different transits we're experiencing. So I hope this is helpful for you. You can like, you can share, you can comment. All of these things help me, and blessings on this portal for you. Namaste.